Picture it. London, 1894. The city sleeps uneasy. Its criminal underworld has lost its king, but peace never lasts long in Baker Street. Welcome to Critical Weight Theory, and today I'm exploring one of the best and boldest Sherlock Holmes adaptations ever filmed, or at least from what I understand, it's very highly reviewed. I am actually just a novice when it comes to Sherlock Holmes. I know he's a famous detective character and that there have been many different adaptations of his different stories. And this was really my first foray into the world of Sherlock Holmes. So hopefully that gets you all jazzed up to listen to this episode. I'm Wade, and yes, today we're revisiting the Granada Television series, The Return of Sherlock Holmes, beginning with Season 1, Episode 1, The Empty House. And it's possible that I'll continue following this series here and there. Maybe I'll do some other reviews, I'm not sure. But it first aired on July 9th, 1986, and it's one of those rare TV moments where fiction and television history align perfectly. The return of Sherlock Holmes, and you have the debut of a new Watson for this episode. From what I understand, the previous person playing him, he backed out or something happened. I'm not entirely sure. Even though I did research this episode, it's not the most thoroughly done research of all time or anything like that. So, why did Sherlock Holmes return? Well, when the episode begins, Dr. John Watson has moved on. Holmes has been dead for 3 years, killed, we're told, in a final struggle with Professor Moriarty at the Reichenbach Falls. But that illusion doesn't last. Watson, now living a quiet life, is called to investigate a mysterious death. Ronald Adair, a young man shot dead in his locked room. The case seems unsolvable until Watson bumps quite literally into an irritable old bookseller on the street. So, of course, it isn't an old bookseller, it's Holmes, and he's actually alive. And with that revelation, Granada's Return of Sherlock Holmes delivers one of television's most satisfying comebacks. Sorry, I kind of messed up the word television there. And this does seem to be a very well respected series. Some people say the guy playing Sherlock Holmes is one of the best, if not the best, to ever do it. And so why did he disguise himself here, though? So Jeremy Brett is back as Sherlock Holmes, sharp as ever, but carrying a new weight. He doesn't just perform Holmes's return. It's like the character, it's like the actor feels it. Now you see it in his restraint, the flicker of guilt when he reveals his deceit to Watson, and it's a it's a cute little moment even for somebody who has not followed Sherlock Holmes like myself. But no, I got a sense of the sort of profound nature of the reveal to fans of the, I guess, franchise, if you will. And apparently, from what I understand, from what I read, when I did some researching, Sherlock Holmes survived by using Baritsu, a Japanese system of wrestling, and a well timed escape from Reichenbach's edge. So, yeah, that's a fun little trivia fact if you're ever wondering about a Japanese system of wrestling. Remember that one of them is called Baritsu, unless it's totally fictionalized for the story. But it sounds real anyway. And his explanation is brisk, clinical, but his eyes give him away. Holmes missed his buddy, you know. So I did get the emotional weight of that moment. I think the acting was good. It was a little bit subtle, but you get the sense that these characters actually have a long and, I guess, wholesome relationship in many ways because they're solving crimes, right? That's largely a wholesome endeavor. And you get the sense that they have a lot of respect for each other. Dare I say, even love, you know? Opposite him, you have Edward Hardwicke, who's stepping into the role of Watson for the first time, replacing David Burke. His reaction to Holmes' reappearance is a masterclass in understatement, a little bit of shock and disbelief and joy, all conveyed with some quiet dignity. So, again, I like that sort of understated acting. Remember, not all great acting, or at least good acting, is over the top and, overwrought. Some of it's a little bit on the restrained side because, some people in real life are like that. And there's something to be said about some actors who know when to sort of reel it in and not go overly emotional and stuff like that. And Hardwick's Watson isn't the comic foil of older versions. He's grounded, intelligent, and utterly human. Together, he and Brett redefined the Holmes Watson dynamic for the rest of the series, or so I'm told. I've been led to believe that other versions of Watson are a little bit sillier and goofier. If you've ever seen parodies of Sherlock Holmes, you kind of get the idea that Watson is just like a goofy sidekick or something like that. But in this version, he actually is, I guess, more human, I guess you could say. And so what is the empty house exactly? Well, it's you know, it's revealed that Ronald Adair's death ties back to Moriarty's criminal network, and the culprit is Colonel Sebastian Moran, or Moran. I almost sounded like moron. Whoops. But anyway, no disrespect intended here. But anyway, he's Moriarty's ruthless second in command, played by Patrick Allen. Moran, furious at Holmes for destroying his master, plans revenge. He's a crack shot and his target is clear: Holmes himself. Oh no. So, yeah, that's really a simple sort of story here. Like, it's definitely not the most complex mystery you could step into, but it's a return to the Sherlock Holmes character because from what I understand, in the original series of stories, Sherlock Holmes was supposed to be like killed off at that Reichenbach Falls. So this was actually in the original story his return. So if you think about it like that, it's kind of important that a series gets this right because it's a big moment in the Sherlock Holmes legacy to have a character return like that. So Holmes does what Holmes always does. He turns the hunter into the hunted. He sets a trap in an empty house opposite 221B Baker Street, placing a wax bust of himself in the window. As night falls, Moran takes aim, unaware that Holmes and Watson are waiting in the shadows. And yeah, the shot rings out. Moments later, Moran is caught red-handed. It's a classic Conan Doyle type of story. It's clever, efficient, and perfectly brought to life under the direction of Howard Baker from a script by John Hawksworth that stays remarkably faithful to the original 1903 story. From what I understand, I have to admit, I haven't read the original story. It makes me feel illiterate when I say that sort of thing. But who has the time to read everything, Just like I don't have the time to watch everything. I also don't have the time to read everything. But there's a bit of nostalgia, a touch of nostalgia, even for somebody who was not previously a Sherlock Holmes aficionado. You know, I was aware of the character. I mean, everybody's heard the saying "No shit, Sherlock." Well, this was a this was a decent way for me to check out the story because it was relatively simple, and you know, you get this old timey feel of engaging with a classic character, which I like. You know, the episode is it's not that great of a mystery. It's like a reset, really. So after the final problem, both Doyle and the Granada producers faced the same challenge. How do you bring Holmes back from the dead without breaking the spell? Doyle did it with Victorian audacity. Holmes simply faked his death. Granada does it with elegance and emotion. You know, there's a sort of refined aspect how these characters are portrayed. Again, old school, classy. I like that kind of stuff. I mean, it's obviously still dealing with criminal characters here and there and all that stuff, but there's sort of a nice aspect to these old stories because you know it's unlikely that Sherlock Holmes will venture into a strip club or something like that. Not that there's anything particularly wrong with strip clubs in my view, you know, or whatever. You know, he's not gonna walk into a porno set in the middle of the story or something like looking for clues. You know, it's a little bit classier. It's not trashy as a story, and that's something that kind of makes it kind of cool, you know what I mean? In a weird sort of way, in like a retro sort of way. There's that classic feeling of, you know, a person solving a mystery more by using his own wit and intelligence and all that sort of stuff, and rather than spending a lot of time, you know, with a forensics research lab or something like that. I mean, I'm sure he still does that sort of thing, like looking for fingerprints or whatever, but this is more about somebody, you know, cracking a mystery by just using his old noggin. And that's really sort of how you often want these mystery stories to be. Because if it's too weighted down by like I guess uh like I said, forensics teams and all that sort of thing. And if it's if you're not having the main character as like the star or the main characters as the star, and you're putting too much emphasis on, I guess, just the science of it or whatever, well, then I think something can get lost too. So that's why I like having emphasis on Sherlock Holmes and that sort of thing. I mean, don't get me wrong, I can appreciate an episode of Forensics Files, but you kind of want somebody to be like the hero in a story like this, to have like these extra special abilities or skills. And Sherlock Holmes is definitely an intelligent character, and even though that intelligence doesn't fully shine through here because it's a relatively simple story, I still can appreciate the characterization that is put on the screen here. We get flashbacks of Reichenbach Falls, new depth into Holmes' confession, and the sense that his temporary retirement was more than self preservation, it was like a reckoning. It's almost like he was biding his time before, you know, returning and teaching these criminals a lesson, you know. And with Edward Hardwick joining the cast, the return of Sherlock Sherlock Holmes found its perfect balance. Brett's intensity paired with Hardwick's steadiness. You know, you've got logic and compassion, intellect and heart. It's chemistry that carried the series for a few years beyond this episode. So, why does the empty house still matter nearly 40 years later? Well, of course, the character of Sherlock Holmes is iconic, and that character will always matter. I think it also reaffirms everything great about the Sherlock Holmes character. The mystery is tight, even though it's still simple. Like I said, the emotions seem real, and the partnership between Holmes and Watson being reunited, it's like a true victory. And in this single episode, Granada managed to resurrect not just a character, but really an entire world. So whenever Holmes says, "Come, Watson, come, the game is afoot," it's more than a line, it's like a promise, like a wink to the audience. And it's a promise that adventure, intellect, and friendship will always return, no matter how long the fall. So it's a little bit sappy, but I like that. And the wink to the audience is fun too. And if you'd like to watch The Empty House, it's part of the Return of Sherlock Holmes. It's available on many DVD collections and streaming platforms like Tubi, and I'm sure you might even be able to find it on YouTube and stuff like that. So be on the lookout for it. It's a fun episode, and I assume the rest of the series is worth checking out too. And it'd be interesting to compare this version of Holmes' resurrection with other adaptations. I'm led to believe there's Basil Rathbone's version and Benedict Cumberbatch's modern spin as well. Maybe I'll check those out in the future too. So until then, keep your magnifying glass handy and remember, nothing is ever truly elementary.